games the globalists play. You'll have to stay healthy, and the products from Inner Health Botanicals will help you stay on top of your game in the fight. These guys have been around for 6 years, and their products work. My wife and I use them, so does Rob in the office and many others. Inner Food builds your body's defenses and helps get rid of toxins. Try the Alex Jones combo with the coconut milk powder. I love the NutriCafe coffee these guys make. Wonderful taste, and it has extracts that boost your immune system and physical stamina. They have a ton of other herbal products that really work, and it's all made right here in America. Innerfood.com, ENERfood.com, or 866-762-9238, 866-762-9238. Now going to Wayne Madsen. Wayne Madsen, of course, attended the University of Mississippi, where he joined the Navy in ROTC. He then joined the U.S. Navy when he got out of college and was in submarine anti-warfare. He also worked for RCA as a government consultant and then with the National Security Agency, NSA. Later, he worked with the Navy's National Data Automated Command. He's written for many of the biggest publications in the country, and he's also part of EPIC, the Electronic Privacy Information Center. And he has the WayneMadsenReport.com. And I wanted to get him on, less than 12 hours into this Korean Peninsula situation. Of course, we have this report from 2 years ago by Paul Joseph Watson and by Ihan Dai. Rand lobbies Pentagon start war to save U.S. economy. And it goes into the Rand Corporation saying they need a war. We also have the Washington Post here in my stack, where they talk about Obama needing a war. David Broder does, a war to be able to continue his agenda. I'll dig that out and pull it out and show it to you in a minute. But the fact that Obama's there last week, the fact that the North had said, don't come into these islands, don't fire your artillery in our area, and then they sent them in to do it. The fact that it looks like this torpedo that hit the ship a while back ago was German. Again, I'm not saying the North Koreans are good, folks. They're proxies of the Chinese. But this on the heel of the Chinese, Wayne Madsen and others believe firing that missile 2 weeks ago as a way to menace the West ahead of the G20. I want to get Wayne Madsen's take on all this. Wayne, what's your view on it?
Well, again, North Korea is a very paranoid regime. It's Stalinist, but they've made several overtures to the West. I would note that this incident follows their invitation to an American scientist who took them to a new uranium enrichment facility where he saw plenty of centrifuges ready to start enriching uranium. Now, why did the North Koreans do that? Obviously, they're sending a message. We've got this, but we want you to know. They're not trying to hide it. They've asked the United States for years to open diplomatic relations with the North, which could lead, remember, the technically in a state of war. We have an armistice. We don't have a peace agreement between the two countries. So there have been, as you mentioned, these incidents where this past March we had the South Korean corvette in an area. There was the joint U.S.-South Korean exercises. That was an island further to the west from where this island called Yangpyeong. That other island back in March was the westernmost island. But all these islands sit right off the coast of North Korea, so they're highly militarized, highly sensitive areas. And when the U.S. and or South Koreans engage in military exercises in the area, they always engender a negative response from the North. We have to remember, as nutty as Kim Jong-il, who's now turning over the reins of power to his son, as crazy as he is, the South Korean president, Lee Myung-bak, is just as crazy. He's a right-winger. He's very unpopular in South Korea. The South Koreans don't like him. He's always rattling sabers. And I believe on the heels of him hosting G20, the fact that you got a South Korean as Secretary General of the UN, all this plays into Lee Myung-bak also flexing his muscles as much as the people that run North Korea are flexing theirs. That's a recipe for disaster. And instead of coaxing the North by staging exercises in North Korean waters, the U.S. should be pulling back on this activity rather than projecting its military presence right into the North Koreans' face.
Well, I've also got David Broder just a month ago on October 31st, less than a month ago, telling Obama, hey, start a war. You know, North Korea, Iran, whatever. We've got neocons telling him to do it. You've got all these Obama advisors saying you need some type of crisis to look strong. You've got the dollar plunging. Now it's going back up today because people run to that safe haven because this empire has the biggest military. This is on the heels of the meeting over there. We know this is a provocation to send these ships into this disputed area when North Korea said they would fire on them. And so clearly they're looking for a provocation. I mean, there's no doubt of that.
Right. And the way the news media is treating this is, you know, North Korea always is, it's like from central casting, the enemy that we'd love to have. Secretive, unpredictable. I mean, how many times has James Bond been after North Koreans, you know, in the James Bond movies? But the fact is that the South is just as unpredictable. I would note that the South is now installing a ballistic missile system backed up by a radar system they're getting from Israel. So the North doesn't look with favor on this type of thing. We also have China upset about similar U.S. naval exercises with South Korean independent ones right off the Chinese coast. They feel, look, if you're going to do that off our coast, we can do things off your coast to let you know that we can more than anything else. So we also saw the incident with the South Korean ship being sunk, which a lot of people, including myself, and this was verified by people very close to both the North Korean government, the Chinese government, and the U.S. government, felt that that was a provocation to get the Japanese Prime Minister Hatayama to renege on his campaign promise of throwing the U.S. out of Okinawa. He changed his mind. He was attacked by his own party. He resigned, and now a pro-U.S. Prime Minister is in Tokyo, and he's helping rattle the states along with the Americans and South Koreans against North Korea.
And it's a nice political diversion. How does this tie in, going back to the Chinese missile? A, have you got any more intel confirming your sources that that was a Chinese missile? A, B, why did they do it? C, how does this tie into this latest situation? We know both the West uses South Korea as a proxy and China uses North Korea as a proxy.
Right, and there's now sources very close to NORAD that are saying, yes, it was a Chinese missile, and that President Obama was informed immediately by the commander of NORAD about the incident, and all he did, of course, was keep it tamped down. He was getting ready to meet the Chinese president in Seoul, and then again in Yokohama, Japan. I would also point out that Jackson Deal, in an op-ed piece in the Washington Post, pointed to the amateurs running foreign policy for the Obama administration. He said basically his core of advisors are ex-Senator Hillary Clinton, an ex-congressional staffer, Tom Donilon, his national security advisor, and a lawyer, Leon Panetta, is running the CIA. And, basically he was pointing out, where's the foreign policy gravitas there? It's not. Remember what Rahm Emanuel said, never let a good crisis go to waste. Is this also an attempt to boost Obama's commander-in-chief credentials? But I think it's coming at a very bad time when U.S.-Chinese relations are very, very frayed. Now he wanted to pitch some sort of associate membership status or partnership status with Russia on this missile shield, and the Chinese look at that as bringing NATO right to its own borders with Russia. So, and then, of course, trying to push the idea of India joining the UN Security Council, something else that China is very much opposed to. So it looks like Obama keeps poking his finger in the Chinese eye. Maybe he forgets that China owns a great deal of our debt. But, again, maybe this is back to the Washington Post op-ed, where, this guy's not the smartest guy in the world. We all, just because somebody speaks well, actors speak well because they remember their lines. But there's some of them are the dumbest people on the face of the earth.
Let's expand on that. Dealing with South Korea, their president is saying now that he may just go ahead and order his Air Force to bomb their missile sites and I guess their nuclear sites. So that is an incredible escalation. But I guess they've got the pretext now because the North took the bait when they went into those disputed waters and engaged in naval bombardments right off their coast. I mean, it looks like they're trying to set the precedent, the pretext, the excuse, the rationale, the moral authority to go ahead and attack the North. What if A, do you agree with that? And B, if they do that, why is South Korea being given the green light by the Anglo-Americans to do this?
Well, as I mentioned, Lee Myung-bak, the South Korean president, is a very cagey and unpredictable character. He's a real right-winger. He's a real neocon type, and he may fit into this global strategy of increasing tensions where tensions don't need to be increased. And certainly we have the UN Truce Commission at Panmunjom right on in the DMZ. These types of incidents should be being discussed by the United Nations. Now, I would note that the UN Security Council is supposed to meet tomorrow morning, but the UN also needs to put the reins on President Lee of South Korea, because he's not popular. He's going to use this as a pretext to increase his own poll ratings with the South Korean people. But I think most of the South Koreans saw his fingerprints on the sinking of the Cheonan, the South Korean corvette, last March, and they probably see his fingerprints on this, trying to boost his popularity and his image. And so far, the Western media is treating South Korea as an innocent victim, when in fact they're not totally blameless every time there's these incidents with the North.
Wayne, do you agree with Russia and their foreign minister saying, quote, this is a colossal danger and could trigger a larger regional war or even a conflagration?
Oh, absolutely, because we have to remember that the South Korean capital, Seoul, is within range of North Korean nuclear-tipped artillery shells. So you can imagine what would happen if all-out war breaks out. There would obviously be a U.S. nuclear response against North Korea.
Because we saw these stories, though, that they're really just testing, giant deposits of TNT underground, and that the signature doesn't show a real A-bomb. But then we see more evidence, and Jane's Weapons Quarterly, who is very respected, says they do have several weapons. What's your intel? Do they really have functioning, deployable A-bombs?
Oh, yes. Well, they've already tested one. It wasn't a perfect test, but we know they've tested. They've also tested several of their missiles, including firing some over Japan. But this is a regime that we should have an embassy in Pyongyang, just like we should have embassies in Tehran, Iran, and also in Havana, Cuba. But because of certain interest groups that basically veto U.S. foreign policy for their own narrow interests, we're not allowed to open up to these governments.
And that keeps Kim Jong-il in power. That keeps Fidel Castro in power.
And Ahmadinejad in power. And where we should be, now obviously we have this big scandal with U.S. embassies all around the world, carrying out espionage against the citizens of those countries. Having a U.S. embassy, of course, comes with mixed blessings.
Yeah, that's friendly nations. Our government has them in friendly nations.
Well, friendly and hostile.
No, but I was just filling listeners in on the latest scandal is friendly nations that our government's carrying out espionage on.
Yeah, like Iceland and Denmark and Finland. Obviously, we're not at loggerheads with any of those. But be that as it may, I think what the